This week, we welcome Nate Fick, the General Manager of Elastic Security and former CEO of Endgame, to discuss Elastic's resource-based pricing. In the Leadership and Communications segment, why business leaders need to understand their algorithms, how to do a digital detox, 3 easy steps for success, how remote workers make work friends, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Do you know what the biggest cyber risk is for your organization? It's the browser, and your users are in it all the time. Every time a link is clicked, untrusted web code enters your network and runs on your machine, exposing you to risk. What if users had full access to the web but never touched web code? You'd have all the benefit of the web and none of the risk. That's why Authenticate built Silo. It's a browser built in the cloud that runs all web content in a remote, isolated browser that never touches your network or device. With a simple click, your organization is fully protected from all web exploits. Find out more at securityweekly.com/authenticate. That's authentic number 8. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 153, recorded November 25th, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado, waiting for 10 inches of snow. Joining me remotely from Rhode Island are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Paul Asadorian from G-Unit Studios.
Hey, Matt. It's good to be here.
Stay dry in Rhode Island, I heard, after yesterday. And also joining us remotely is our second co-host, Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey, Matt, how you doing? Paul, how goes? It's another good Monday.
Yes, it's a good Monday. I have my Buckeyes shirt on after the Penn State win this weekend. I had to do it for Mike Shima on ASW earlier, and I didn't change before this. But
yeah, it was a rainy day in Gillette Stadium.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, great game though. Great game. It was good defense yesterday.
It's a W.
And it is Renee's birthday today. My daughter is 20 today, so happy birthday, Renee. I had to do that real fast.
And next up, you guys played Michigan, right? So that's like a big game, right?
Big
I don't
game.
follow
It's
college
a big
football,
rivalry
but,
game.
Yeah.
Yep. Saturday is the big rivalry game, against Michigan. In the big house, which is always a tough place to play. All right. Attend RSA Conference 2020, February 24th to 28th, and join thousands of security professionals, forward-thinking innovators, and solution providers for 5 days of actionable learning, inspiring conversation, and breakthrough ideas. Register before January 24th and save $900 on a full conference pass. You can also save an extra $150 with the code 50 Uniform Sierra Whiskey Kilo Lima Yankee Foxtrot Delta, and we will find a way to make that shorter and easier, I promise. Also, we're currently running our annual listener feedback survey. Please visit securityweekly.com, click the survey tab, and select the 2019 listener survey to submit your responses. All right, to our interview. Nate Fick is the GM of Elastic Security and former CEO of Endgame. He is also an operating partner at Bessemer Ventures Partners. Before joining Endgame, Nate was the CEO at the Center for a New American Security. He led Marine Corps infantry and reconnaissance units in combat in both Afghanistan and Iraq. His book about the experience, One Bullet Away, was a New York Times bestseller, a Washington Post Best Book of the Year, and one of the Military Times Best Military Books of the Decade. Nate, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thanks for having me on, everybody. I really appreciate it. I've watched a lot of people I admire in the industry on here, so I'm glad to join the lineup.
Well, first, a couple things. One, thank you for your service, which I always like to do for our military folks. I mean, the commitment that our military makes for this country, unparalleled. So thank you for that. But also, congratulations on the Elastic and Endgame joining forces, as I think it was stated in one of the articles.
Yeah, that's right. It's I think it's actually a nice turn of phrase, and I think it also accurately reflects how everybody feels about it. So, yeah, it's been an interesting year. Eager to talk more about it.
Yeah, so let's get into it. Let's start with just a quick update on the Elastic Endgame coming together, and then we'll get into some very interesting changes in the way Endgame, the Endpoint product, is going to license itself and kind of price itself into the Elastic structure. And I want to dig into that a little deeper. But let's give an overview of kind of how things are with bringing the two companies together.
Yeah, sure. So maybe best to go back before we go forward and kind of put it in some context. And I think anybody who's been following the security market is well aware of some of the large trends underway. I think the evolution at Endgame in the last couple of years was one of building out an increasingly comprehensive and high efficacy and validated endpoint product, where we were unifying prevention, detection, response, and threat hunting on a single agent, delivering that as a cloud product or an on-prem product. And as we looked at the year ahead or the 2 years ahead, we saw that the things we were really going to have to do were get global distribution scale, build that distribution infrastructure, and we were going to have to bring what we were calling global search to bear. So the ability to ingest, store, analyze, make sense of, act on large amounts of security data. And we could either do that ourselves, or we could find a way to partner up and kind of leapfrog the roadmap. And I sort of had an epiphany and said, look, we use Elastic on the back end. We think Elastic potentially has a really compelling security use case. I wonder if they're thinking that way. So I reached out and had a conversation with their CEO, Shai Bannon, and it turned out that we immediately had a real meeting of the minds. So that's what got the conversation going.
Yeah, and as Paul talks about his enchanted IOC quadrants, right? I mean, we talk a lot about log and network and threat intelligence data, and we always knew this endpoint piece was hanging over here, that we needed the information from the endpoint as well. And what this combination of the two teams really does is kind of covers all four of those quadrants in a single integrated solution.
That's exactly right. And that's what got us fired up about it. I mean, you guys know better than anybody, the security market is a talent-based market, right? And we've all seen the companies that have merged or joined forces, and the top-tier talent walks out the door and you can't make good on the vision, right? And so what was most important to us was to find a joint vision that was going to be really exciting, really disruptive, and sufficiently compelling to keep these kind of best-in-world people engaged. And I think we've done that in this what's effectively vertical integration of endpoint and SIEM. So combine a best-in-market endpoint with best-in-world search. So put the Endgame endpoint out there on or the Endgame agent out there on every endpoint in your environment. Stream the telemetry into the Elastic SIEM, powered by the stack. Enable the visualization using Kibana, very easy to use, customizable visualization, and then allow the user to react from the stack. So, take not only prevention, detection, and response and combine them, but take prevention, detection, analysis, kind of storage, and then action back from the stack. So yeah, we're fired up about it and think it really is a game changer.
Yeah, it's definitely a game changer when we look at all the pieces. Now, the second thing you did after after coming into Elastic is you decided to get away from your per endpoint pricing and change the pricing paradigm. Which I give you a lot of credit for this because Paul will remember these days when we were redoing the pricing stuff at Tenable. One of the options I put on the table was to move to a consumption-based pricing model. Per asset pricing can really hinder an organization. And so we put this concept out there, but it got a lot of pushback for a lot of reasons, and I'm going to ask you a couple questions about those as we go. But I think it was really something innovative to say, let's not price by endpoint anymore. Let's move away from that. So kind of what was that next iteration of what the pricing model looks like for Endgame and Elastic?
Yeah, so this is something that we've been grappling with at Endgame for a while. We knew there was a problem. I think everybody who lives in the per endpoint world is to some extent dissatisfied with it, but we didn't have the power on our own to change it. And I think joked with our team at one point is it was like navigating. There's the Greek myth about navigating between Scylla and Charybdis. These like rocks in the rapids, and the rocks that we had to find a way through were per endpoint pricing on one side, and kind of ingest or consumption-based pricing on the other. And we didn't actually want to go with either of those purely. So the problem with per endpoint-based pricing is that increasingly you can ask, well, what's an endpoint anyway? And we saw customers who, because of the dynamism of virtual environments or for a bunch of other reasons, kind of intrinsic to modern infrastructure, their number of endpoints was pretty dynamic, and that resulted in one of two problems. Either you ended up with customers who were routinely buying more than they needed, right, which they don't like, and ultimately that's bad for the vendor too because you end up with an unhappy customer, or they were underbuying and had to slap down kind of rapid contract mods over the course of the year, which is a hassle for us and even more of a hassle for them. So we wanted to find a way to get past per endpoint pricing. But the other natural model, or more commonly held model in the market, is ingest based or consumption based. And the challenges there in our minds were also twofold. On the one hand, you disincentivize use, right? Because the more a customer is using it at any given time, right, the more they're going to have to pay. And so you end up perhaps with customers putting policies in place that are better for their budget, but maybe not better for security. We didn't want to encourage that kind of disincentivization. But also we wanted to ensure that customers had some price predictability, right? That they could budget and plan over the course of the year or multi-year. And so we knew that these were problems, but we independently at Endgame didn't have a great solution. And then it became immediately apparent in our conversation with Elastic that Elastic actually has a different model, and a model that has not yet been applied in security, where we could do something really different. And that is this resource-based pricing, which is you're effectively buying data storage. And so it's you can answer right up front, say, hey, do we want to save, do we want to hold 7 days of data, of endpoint telemetry? Do we want to hold 90 days? Do we want to hold, a year? And you can do that in a variegated way across your environment, depending upon whether you want to put different policies on different machines. So, we think it's an elegant solution that gives customers the flexibility to have highly dynamic environments. It gives them the ability to model out cost over a long period of time. And it doesn't incentivize the user from doing what's right from a security standpoint.
Yeah, there's a couple things there. It wasn't only the customers from a budgeting perspective for consumption model. I also noticed that the vendors themselves were worried about what the revenue impact of a consumption model would be, right? Because we're so used to prepaid annual contracts on a per whatever basis that we could predict the revenue streams, right? And so part of what I saw pushback-wise, Nate, was this concept of, wait, we don't know what our potential revenue is, so how can we be, predicting our revenue growth into a public market, for example, right? Which a number of the security companies now are public, so they need to account for that, right? That was always another little challenge.
Well, yeah, it's also on the sales side. How do you pay and calculate a commission on something that could be a consumption-based subscription model?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so this has the benefit too of being the addition of Endpoint to a pricing model that Elastic's already rolled out across their whole suite of products over at this point a multi-year period of time. So the sales team knows how to sell it. Customers are familiar with it. It's new to Endpoint Security, but it's not new to their customer base or to the sales team.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the advantages for you under the Elastic umbrella is that this was Elastic's model, right? They didn't have to go out and convince people of a brand new model after having spent, 10, 15 years on a per endpoint pricing model, right? This was probably a lot easier conversation with your customers.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the decision that you guys had at Tenable, and I think that's exactly right. We've probably all grappled with that in one form or another as our markets have changed. It's really hard to take an existing customer set, right, an existing business and revenue model, and say we're going to flip it on its head. But we had the good fortune to be at this inflection point, right, with where we were joining forces with a sales team that's already hundreds of reps globally, a set of customers, 9,000 customers who are already familiar with this model, and say, okay, now we're going to drop endpoint security into it. And it's actually, I mean, I don't think it overstates it to say it's sort of a once or twice in a career you actually get the opportunity to flip the table like this and do it in a way that's not betting the farm like it would be if you're just trying to upend things in a single company kind of midstream.
Well, Nate, that begs the question of something we've talked about a long time ago on the show and haven't revisited in quite some time, and that is, as a vendor, if you're offering a SaaS solution, how do you calculate your costs and then make that relative to your pricing on a per customer basis? And then what, from the customer perspective, are they responsible for some of those cloud costs? Is that an option? Can they archive data on their own, or is that part of their plan?
Yeah, our basic proposition is to put as much of that in the customer's hands as possible. And so, we're platform agnostic in the sense that we're willing to work with a customer where they are and be transparent about what it is that the drawbacks that we see in different models and let them choose. And that's again one of the benefits of stepping into a model that's already pretty well deployed across the major cloud providers.
And hope they make the right choice.
Well, and help steer them to the right choice. I mean, you guys, you know as well as I do that security is about it is a long-term relationship. It's a trusted advisor relationship. These are not one-off deals, right? It's not a fire and forget kind of thing. It's we had the culture at Endgame where we didn't ring the gong on the first sale, right? We rang the gong on the renewal. And I think that that ethos in security, will take you a long way. So yeah, you hope to make the right choice, and not every customer does, but you can at least be transparent and engage with them in helping to. And
you can pivot too. It's not like when Indiana Jones has to choose the Holy Grail. It's not that finite of a decision, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, Paul. I mean, from someone who would be on the consuming end of this as a client, right? It's number one, the architecture is great. It allows me to architect a solution that fits my needs, not only from an architecture perspective, but from a cost perspective. But then the flexibility and the agility to burst if I need to, right? So in working with you at Elastic, I could architect what's my barrier to entry, right? How do I get into this, and how do I start utilizing this from a utilization perspective? It's why organizations like mine are starting to migrate their infrastructure over to things like Azure and AWS, because it gives us that ability, number one, to start looking at it from a budgeting perspective and say, all right, here's what we need to consume from a utilization perspective. And hey, by the way, I have the flexibility to burst later on if we decide to grow.
That's exactly right. Yep.
So I want to get into the details just a little bit, because I looked at some of the pricing, different tiers and stuff. So if you're an existing Elastic customer, it's pretty straightforward, I think, right? You're already under a resource pricing model. I think to get the endpoint capabilities, you have to upgrade to the enterprise tier. Is that right, Nate?
So right now for Elastic's existing customers, that's right. So Elastic has essentially a free offering called Basic, and then 3 paid tiers: Gold, Platinum, and Enterprise. We're introducing endpoint security in the Enterprise tier, and a religious issue, if you will, for Elastic, starting with their founder, who's still the CEO of the public company, Shai Bannon, has been, we're never going to charge for something that was previously free. Instead, we're going to push capability down into the lower priced and ultimately into the free tier over time, so that customers continually get more for the dollar they spend, and they never have anything taken away. So we're going to introduce endpoint security in the enterprise tier. That's exactly right at the beginning here, and then we'll be expanding it over time.
Now, if you're an existing Endgame customer, what does that kind of migration transition look like? I assume they can stay where they are for now and then kind of migrate over. So how does that kind of look?
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into this. Again, starting from the sort of philosophical point that we wanted every Endgame customer to not only maintain the endpoint coverage that they're accustomed to, but also get more. And what can that more be? So the way we've structured it is, effectively every Endgame customer, when they come up for renewal now, will renew and will get the full Elastic offering, and they may or may not use it. Candidly, they may choose to use only endpoint security, but they're going to have access to the Elastic SIEM, and then they'll have access to the full power of the Elastic Stack. And so, from a pricing standpoint, almost obviously everything is unique, but generally speaking, customers are not going to pay more, but they're going to get more. And they're going to have the ability then to ingest, store at least a week of that event data, and optionally for them, as much as they want.
That's great, because I think if we think about it, a lot of people are using the Elastic Stack already. As we were preparing for this interview a couple of weeks ago, I know how many security vendors are using the Elastic Stack themselves, let alone how many customers are probably also already using the stack. So by giving all of your existing customers access to the rest of the stack that they're already probably familiar with and using is probably a really good thing if they really want to bring integrated security together.
So Elastic has had almost something like a billion downloads of its software, which is a staggering number, right? And it's one of those companies that everybody uses, but unless you're in the industry or in technology, a developer, many people haven't heard of it, right? And they don't realize that it powers so many of the apps that we use. It's the search box and so many of the websites that people are familiar with. And it's that reach and that familiarity at the developer level that kind of gets me most excited about the long-term power here, because I'm accustomed to a very top-down go-to-market, right? Where security vendors are building relationships with CIOs and CISOs, occasionally talking to boards, and then trying to get things pushed down in an organization. Well, look, we all know how developers react to that. Elastic's approach has been organic and bottom up, right? Harnessing the power of those hundreds of millions of downloads, cultivating grassroots enthusiasm in almost every organization around the world. And then when 20 or 30 or 40 users in any one company are using Elastic, they get a knock on the door, right? And Elastic comes in and says, hey, we see that you're already using Elastic. Are you aware of this, and this use case?
Right. And so that grassroots now gives you the ability to actually kind of come at it from both ways. I mean, there's still an enterprise sale at the end of the day, I think, right? From a CIO, CISO education perspective. But if you've got the developers leveraging the capabilities and now they can integrate this new functionality collecting their log data from the SIM perspective to help them on maybe performance or security issues at the development layer. The ability to put the endpoint protection on their Kubernetes cluster because somebody needs to secure Kubernetes. That's a good thing because you can get it from both angles.
But
Yeah,
Nate, what you just said though was very compelling, and I want our audience to recognize that it's not just about from the bottom up and top down. It's about hitting the right audience at the right time. And that little story you just told from Elastic is the perfect use case for you have to reach the technical audience to a certain level, then you can go to the top level, but you also have to have the right messaging and the right timing for it all.
We like to say that bottom up also includes up, right? That you build that grassroots enthusiasm, put a tool out there in the world, open source it, cultivate a community, and also bring to bear the subject matter expertise to have the credible conversation at the top. And you got to do both. And I think we have a really unique and compelling opportunity here to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason and Paul, I want to make sure, because I took over most of this interview, I want to make sure you guys get a chance to ask any more questions to Nate while we have him.
Oh, that's right. I took over the past few, so.
No, I mean from my perspective, right? So I'm the CIO and the CISO for a technology services company, right? So from my side, it's what are the conversations that you're having at my level, with CISOs to show the business case, right? And so in order for me to go and get an investment to uproot my current endpoint and my current SIM, I need to be able to realize economies of scale. I need to be able to realize some level of either operational efficiency or cost savings in order for me to get the CFO to sign off on it, right? So what are those conversations that you're having with CISOs to say, hey, listen, you may want to rethink, number one, the way you're spending your money on endpoint and on your SIM, and number two, here's the operational efficiencies and the gains you're going to get to the business, so you can be empowered to go have those right conversations to make that transition.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that I spent a lot of my time on. In addition to being a security vendor for these last many years, I've been on at least one public company board where I've had the opportunity to sit on the other side of the table, right, and talk to our CIO and talk to our CISO and go through the audit process and be forced to think about security from an enterprise risk management standpoint. And it's been invaluable to have that perspective. And understand what the thought process is like across the table. And so what that's done to me and the way it's influenced my thinking, I mean, I think about people, process, and technology, and I think about them in that order, right? And it's easy as a tech vendor to think that technology is going to solve the problem, but it's not. If I have $1 to spend on security, I'm going to spend it on people. If I have another $1, I'm going to spend it on process, and only am I going to spend that third $1 on technology. And so, how does the joint Elastic and Endgame solution map to those? I think from a people standpoint, we're really focused on ease of use and helping you get more out of the people you already have. We hear all the time about this endemic talent shortage in security, and there are a couple of ways to tackle that, right? You can tackle it on the supply side with training. That's good. But we can tackle it immediately on the demand side by building a product and delivering a solution that's easy enough to use that more people can be more effective. I think you guys are familiar with Endgame's natural language interface, Artemis. We're going to continue Artemis in the joint product and expand it, right? We're going to expand our common query language across endpoint and SIM and sort of deliver one language for security. On the process side, I think one of the things that our CIO and CISO customers grapple with is just vendor complexity, right? Too many vendor relationships, dozens of them in large enterprises, and a bunch of products that are not designed to work seamlessly with each other. So the fact that we can kind of seamlessly and organically now architect integrated prevention, detection, response driven from the SIM and deliver that at scale is a big change. And so those are the things that I tend to talk to with CIOs and CISOs. And I'll tell you, I mean, I'll give you an example from just a couple of weeks ago in New York. I was there with the Elastic CEO, Shai, and I mean, literally, this is the only time I've been with a technology leader who's getting pulled aside for selfies at these events because they've done such an incredible job of cultivating community. And we went to dinner with a bunch of CIOs and CISOs, and almost every one of them, as we went around the table doing introductions, prefaced his or her comments by saying, I don't go to vendor dinners, but. And the but was always some form of, I don't think about Elastic as a vendor, this is a community. And that's a radically different thing in security, and I think it's a powerful one.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point earlier on when you said, it's all about the relationship, right? It's about that long-term relationship, and it's not the first sale that's the bang for the buck. It's the long-term, right? So that's where CIOs and CISOs are looking to partner up with organizations. Number one, who can speak the language of the CEO, like you were just doing, and be able to have those conversations with the CEO and the CFO, and empower us to be able to have those conversations. But also the mindset of this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. And I mean, what you're doing is you're enabling the community, you're enabling enterprises to be successful, and those are great for everybody at the end of the day, because the community sees the benefit and the value, the organization sees the benefit and the value, and that helps to strengthen that relationship, which I think is great for everybody at the end of the day.
So over time, I think if you're actually delivering real security, your customers notice and the word gets out. And if you're actually delivering products that work, the word among the developer community gets out, and you end up recruiting and retaining better and better talent. So it's a virtuous cycle. We've all seen it unfold both ways, and we're really excited about what the next years hold.
I can't wait. Nate, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thanks, Nate.
If anybody wants to learn more about Elastic or their new resource-based pricing, please visit securityweekly.com/Elastic. We'll take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.